done. They want their tax cuts. I pay for it by taking away the top 1% of the tax cut. Ladies and gentlemen, the idea that the Republican Party and this administration and their candidates have a credible argument to make on national security or anti-terrorism activity is laughable. Laughable. And the president, right after the recommendation, right after that report of the Intelligence Committee, the president went on television and said, we've made great progress against Al-Qaeda. So to sum it up, the Director of Homeland Security obviously read the report, and the president obviously shredded the report.
Homeland Security Director, right?
Homeland Security Director is absolutely, positively, unequivocally correct. Now, the gut feeling about if an attack is going to take place, I don't know about that, but I'm telling you, I believe the genesis of the gut feeling is all the intelligence data he sees. If the intelligence community wrote a report saying Al-Qaeda's on the run, we have seriously interdicted their ability to create another terrorist tragedy in the United States of America. I doubt whether he'd be saying, in fact, my gut feeling is we're going to have an attack. Ladies and gentlemen, this idea, if we don't fight him in Baghdad, we've got to fight him in Boston, what a preposterous notion. I've been saying it for 4 years. Look at it, folks. Do you think if we were out of Iraq completely, those attacks wouldn't have happened in London? And conversely, do you think if we were, in fact, had eliminated our whole involvement in the Middle East, those attacks wouldn't take place around the world? We're going to get a life here. We're going to get a life. As I said to the president in my last visit, every time I go down, I get debriefed. I go down and I debrief the War Cabinet, which is a responsibility I have when I come back from Iraq or Afghanistan. And two times ago with the president on my 6th trip, as Mr. President, he said, well, we're fighting for the rest. Mr. President, if the Lord Almighty came down and sat in the middle, his entire War Cabinet was there, from the Vice President to the commander in Iraq on a direct link teleconference with the television screen, and our ambassador and the leading general and the Secretary of Defense, etc. And so, Mr. President, the Lord Almighty came down and sat in the middle of this table in the Roosevelt Room and guaranteed you that every jihadi in the world was gone. You still have an overwhelming war in your hands in Iraq. And conversely, Mr. President, if tomorrow the Lord said, I'll snap my fingers, end the war in Iraq, you still have a serious problem with jihadis around the world. This president conflates everything. That old bad joke, if the only instrument you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. They have no coherent policy. It's a disaster for this country.
We're off with in a debate before the end of providing you're the Democratic nominee.
Well, my dad has an expression, God love, he's passed away, but an expression you've heard in your family is, be careful what you wish for. It's presumptuous of me to suggest who would be the weakest or strongest candidate on the Republican side. I'm having trouble figuring out the Democratic side. But let me just say to you that I am truly anxious to debate my Republican colleagues on national security, on matters relating to homeland security, matters relating to terror. For that matter, I'm anxious to debate my Democratic colleagues on that. And I really mean this. Think about it, folks. You know all these debates we've had? Can you imagine in the midst of the Vietnam War, us not having a single debate just on Vietnam? We're doing you a disservice unless the Democratic Party agrees that all of us stand on a stage, sponsored by a network, and spend 2 hours doing nothing but debating the war in Iraq. It's a single
Nomination
here in Iowa. I'm not being facetious. Look, I began my career as a young senator with another young senator that maybe some of you will remember here, Senator Dick Clark of Iowa. I got elected in 1972, and Dick got elected in 74. The first major bill each of us introduced was a bill to publicly finance all of our elections. The idea that I cannot compete, if you listen to the national press, because I have not raised the money that the frontrunners have raised in terms of front-running in money. It's obscene.
Yes.
The idea that you cannot compete in a Democratic primary unless you can raise $100 million. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm counting on, and it's not being solicitous here, it's a statement of fact. I'm counting on Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina thinking ideas are equally as important as money.
Yes.
As chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, when elected president, who is the first foreign leader you invite to the White House?
You know what I'll do? I will go to them. Let me just tell you, when John Kerry, I worked very hard for John Kerry. John Kerry, I believe, let him say, but I believe he was going to ask me to be Secretary of State. And in preparation, because you can't wait, I'm superstitious, you know, but you can't wait till November to try to put together a State Department. Who would you hire? What would you do? How would you move? And there was essential agreement that if John had won, and I think he actually did win, but if John had won, if John had won, I had been granted permission that I would, as a Secretary of State designee, be meeting, I would travel immediately to our European allies and in the Middle East to begin to set up discussions about how we were going to fundamentally change our approach to foreign policy. As President of the United States, the person I would pick as Secretary of State would have a portfolio the day after I was elected to begin to go lay the groundwork. And what I would do, I would visit, literally, I would make it clear, what's the biggest problem we have so far? This administration has said for 7 years in an arrogant tone, I want you, the rest of the world, to listen to what's on our mind, but I'm deaf about what you have.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear your positions. Let me tell you what I want. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not how you lead. I would make it clear by the physical gesture of getting on a plane and visiting first with our NATO allies, then moving on to meet in the Middle East as well as India, Pakistan, and China. I would make those visits. I would end in Japan and head back. I would also then send, as the next tranche, I would move myself into Latin America. So the first thing you should understand about me, I've traveled to all those countries. But I would be, as President of the United States, traveling to let them know that I want to know what's on their mind. I'd make clear what's on my mind. But ladies and gentlemen, we are more isolated in the world today than any time in American history. Literally. And I know that sounds like hyperbole.
No, that's right.
But those of you who travel, can you name me a single solitary country you've been in, including Israel, where people say, thank God for America? They still care about Americans. They have lost real respect. And folks, what is our power? What is the nature of our power? Our military is necessary but not sufficient. What has allowed us to lead the world have been our ideas and our ideals, and we have scrapped them. We have put us in such a hole.
Yeah.
I'll conclude by saying there's a famous story about the Cuban Missile Crisis. President John Kennedy was wise enough to send the leading diplomats in the United States to meet with every world leader to explain what was going on. He sent former Secretary of State Dean Acheson to meet with Charles de Gaulle, who was then running France. And Dean Acheson,